So how do we, honey, hold each other accountable for not working too much?
I remember when you were working your day job at the corporation, and then you're doing consulting on the side, and I could tell when you were tired by looking at your eyes. I don't think I ever told you that. I would ask you, honey, how are you feeling? How are you doing? Trying to check in with you to see where you're at.
Thriving in Tandem. It's a podcast for you, the married entrepreneur that wants to win in business and marriage at the same time.
Welcome to Thriving in Tandem.
All right, we're back for this week's Thriving in Tandem, honey, and we got a potentially explosive episode.
Ooh, sparks will be flying, huh?
Well, maybe a topic that can cause conflict between husband and wife.
Is it going to get spicy?
Well, one of the things, we have to guard as entrepreneurs is working too much. And we can get so consumed with the business that, you're just all in and you're not spending enough time with your spouse and your family. And if this is your first time listening to us, that's kind of what we're all about. It's Thriving in Tandem, how to have greater work-life balance. And we definitely want you and just like our business to succeed. But how do we do it in such a way that we make sure we still prioritize our marriage and our family? Because at the end of the day, that's what's most important. And so, how to do both well. And that's kind of what this podcast is all about, is showing you how to do both those areas well. And one of the main issues is about just working too much, because, we've had clients that financially the business is doing well and they can, not work as many hours and take those weekends off and take the vacations or a 3-day weekend or something. But there's something ingrained in us, probably from the time from childhood, like you and I, that is just, grind it out. Just keep working. It's almost like we don't know what to do if we're not working.
Well, and I think sometimes it becomes people's identity, their business.
Yeah.
Like what you're saying, they don't know what to do. They don't have their career, their job, their business.
Yeah, because we get accolades, when our business does well, right? We get, yay, attaboys when, even when I was in corporate, whenever you get the big sale or you have a great year, you get those attaboys. And of course, in the business, kind of same thing, that, whenever you score a big project or a big contract or something like that, there's times for celebration and we get this gratification and we hit these milestones and it feeds your soul. Mm-hmm. Right.
And I think sometimes people just don't have any other hobbies or interests besides their work because they get so consumed by it.
Yeah. And so one of the topics we want to tackle about today is really, I think inherently we know we don't want or should be working as hard as maybe we are, but we don't know how to turn it off. And how can we, since we're married, how can we use each other as accountability partners, which can cause conflict, right? Because, you telling me maybe I shouldn't
tell me what to do.
shouldn't be taking on as much responsibilities. Not just business, but even volunteer opportunities or being on boards. I've talked about, being on, people asking me to be on a board of directors, and Kaylee's asking another one. And so how do we prevent ourselves from taking on too much? And if we've already taken on too much, how do we scale back? And part of that is listening to our spouse, because they see what's going on. They see the effect and the toll it's having on us. And of course, they love us and they want the best for us, right?
Well, when we see the toll it's taking on the family as well.
Yeah. And so we're going to talk about how do we do this in a way that doesn't create too much friction, right? But it's a way where we can really honestly listen. And because if we, strike that proper balance of working and resting and having fun, being with family, we'll have a much more fulfilled life, and you'll still be able to grow a thriving business.
And I'll be much more enjoyable to be around.
Yeah, me too. So first, let's kind of talk a little bit about some of the, I don't know, stats, but some of the research around working too much. And if you've already heard this before, just it's a good reminder. But if this is your first time, number one, all the research around work and productivity shows that there's no additional benefit of working beyond 40 to 50 hours a week. whether it's Henry Ford's data in the early 1900s to the Stanford research, more recently, that you look at all the data collectively, it's read 40 to 50 hours of work a week is optimal. And after that, there's no additional benefit. There's no additional productivity that comes out of working more. So why work more, right? And when you look at the health issue, the more you work, the more stress you're putting on yourself, right? Both physically, emotionally, mentally. And even if you have a non really physical business like ours, consulting and coaching, there's still a mental and emotional strain it puts on you. Even if you love your job, and we love our job, we love our business, but it's still adding stress in your body, even if you don't know, because stress, they say, is a silent killer.
Right? Yeah, it can really affect your body, even when you think it doesn't. If you're under stress, it can affect you in a lot of different ways.
And so it'll start to affect you definitely mentally, because it creates a mental strain. And then essentially, the more you work, you can create emotional strain. That's what's kind of the breakdown issue, when people break down. And then, of course, physically, your heart. Mm-hmm. It's the stress just puts additional pressure on your heart. And the World Health Organization just in 2021 released a study that showed that people that work over 40 hours a week are subject to increased risk of heart attack by 35%. So, the more you work, the more stress it puts in your body, the more stress it puts in your heart, and then it's going to affect you not just mentally, emotionally, but eventually physically. And of course, relationships. It's going to affect your relationships, right, honey?
Yes, definitely going to affect your relationship because you're not home much. And then when you are, you're probably not present. Mm-hmm. You're thinking about work. And I think sometimes when we don't know what else to do in our business or how to be more productive, the go-to is put more time in.
Yeah. And so we already, I don't have to show you the research about how more work is going to affect your relationships. You're already probably experiencing it or have experienced it. Mm-hmm. Right. And we've certainly experienced it. So how do we, honey, hold each other accountable for not working too much?
I remember when you were working your day job at the corporation, and then you're doing consulting on the side, and I could tell when you were tired by looking at your eyes. I don't think I ever told you that. Mm-hmm. And so I would ask you, honey, how are you feeling? How are you doing? Trying to check in with you to see where you're at.
And I probably said fine.
You said fine, but I could tell by that look. I'm like, oh, he's not fine. He's really tired.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to say that to you. Oh my gosh, you look tired. But I could just tell. And I'm like, I think he needs to take a little break.
Yeah. And I didn't realize it myself until a little time later. I mean, I don't know when you first realized it, but, eventually I felt it. And then I remember after I finally left my corporate job and was consulting full time, it had probably been a few months after that. I remember we were at a chamber of commerce event, and the marketing manager for the chamber, I remember him looking at me, kind of first walked in the door at some event, and he says, "Oh, you look great." He goes, "You look so much." I don't know if he said you look so much better, but something to that effect. Mm-hmm. That I look happier, or I look more relieved, or I look more peaceful. And I'm like, really? Like, okay. So, apparently.
Well, it's better to say that than like, oh, do you look you look tired? Are you okay? Yeah. I'm like, no, I'm not tired. But now that you said that, it doesn't make me feel good.
So, I didn't realize how much, it took a toll on me and how much other people saw it. I mean, besides you. Right. And so, how do we start to listen to our spouse a little bit more? Because, as you've said to me before about, maybe you're taking on too much, or you're taking on another project or another thing. And of course, that can cause conflict, right?
Mm-hmm. And can cause resentment because I feel like you're spending more time at work and on projects than with me.
Yeah.
Like other people's needs, because it's usually somebody needing something for you, are more important than mine.
Yeah. So I think the first thing is you got to put your ego down and also realize that your spouse has your best interest at heart. Of all the people in relationships around you, your spouse is looking out for the best of you. Just like, I mean, if you don't believe me about your spouse, think about it for yourself. If you see your husband or wife, stressed out, affected, right, by other people or things, or because they're working too much or whatever, I mean, you're concerned, right? I mean, you're concerned about them, and you're probably going to say something to want to fix the problem, which may or may not be received well by your spouse. So thinking about it, I mean, you'll do the same thing that your spouse is going to do for you is, when they recognize something's off, they're going to want to say something.
Yeah, and that might not go well, but in the long haul, it can. Because I remember saying, "Honey, I think you're on another board. How many boards do you want to be on?" And it wasn't something you wanted to hear. But later you thought about it, and then you came up with a number.
Yeah, the number was what my limits were as far as board positions that I held, and I was 5. And so,
because these are all volunteer positions.
Yeah, it's these are all nonprofits I'm on the board of. So, if I was on a for-profit board, those are paid.
Mm-hmm.
A nonprofit board is you pay them. so I'm like, maybe I need to adjust the ratio a little bit, maybe 50-50 on for-profit boards and nonprofit boards. So, the money I get from for-profit boards, I get a nonprofit. I don't know. But anyways, all that to say is, yeah, those questions can be, can cause some conflict, because I'll be thinking like, oh, you don't appreciate what I'm doing, or you're just trying to keep me down from progressing and doing what I love. We think all these negative things about our spouse's intention, when the reality is it's that you're looking for you're looking out for your best interests.
Mm-hmm.
One is, we don't realize it for ourselves, especially as men, that we feel like we can take on everything, when the reality is we can't, and we don't know it usually till it's too late. Like if we have a breakdown, we have a heart attack or a stroke, right?
Something's going to give.
Yeah, something is actually going to give. And as you get older, you'll realize that more. So if you're on the younger end of the spectrum from us, like, less than 40, you can do anything, or you feel like it. As you get into our age, into the 50s, then you realize, oh no, we can't. Right? And you ask anyone in our age or older, they'll say the same thing. It's like, oh yeah, we think we can, but eventually it's going to catch up to us. And so really what you want to do is work smarter, not harder, is what we're talking about. But first thing is really got to let our ego down and realize that your spouse has your best interest at heart. When people are asking, like just board positions or other volunteer positions, people are going to keep asking until you say no. And it's not because they don't care about you, but they don't know everything that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's the other thing. People are going to keep asking, not realizing that maybe they shouldn't ask you because you've taken on too much. But because they don't know your workload, right? But your spouse does. Your spouse knows you better than anybody else, and they know how much you're taking on. And so they're probably the best measuring stick, so to speak, of when you're starting to reach your capacity.
Yeah, because we can see it when you're stressed or you're overloaded and overwhelmed. It comes out on the family.
Yes, and then you're not as good of a spouse or a parent or a person or a business leader. You're really not as good to anybody when you're more and more stressed, because it does come out in a negative way, and it's not just to your spouse, right? It comes out even at work. So absolutely, you got to create those boundaries and those limitations around how much you take on, because a lot of times we talk about this a lot, is less is more.
Mm-hmm.
The less you do, and that allows you to concentrate more fully on fewer things, whether it's in your business or your marriage and life, volunteer work, whatever, the more effective you are in whatever it is you're doing. And so it's better to take a step back. So I was thinking like about maybe there's a code word or something that you and your spouse can have that's a signal to them of, hey, maybe you're taking on too long. Maybe it's time to scale back a little bit, without the typical, hey, you're working too much, or you're taking on another position. Those trigger words, at least for me, it was trigger words. And I think you can determine for yourself, certain questions that your spouse has for you when they're questioning how hard you're working and how much you're taking on, it tends to trigger us.
Yeah, like come up with something neutral.
Yeah. And something that it becomes neutral because it's something you both agree upon,
Right.
right? Like when you come up to me and you want to share something that you think might be a hot button, what do you say?
I say, honey, I need to share something with you. Can you guard your heart? That way I'm not catching you off guard. And when I say that, if it's not a good moment before I get into the what could be challenging conversation with you, you also let me know if now is a good time or not.
Yeah. So that the keyword, the code words is guard your heart.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something we agreed upon is that, okay, whenever Kaylee, whenever you say that or ask that, use that in the question or whatever, or statement, that it's a cue to me that it could be potentially, hurtful, but you don't mean anything critical,
Mm-hmm.
but it's something I need to talk about. So
Right.
I just want you to kind of not react, right? And
Trying
so,
to prepare you.
yeah. And so when she says that, then, I already know it's something we've agreed upon, right? And so I take a moment to take a deep breath, right?
Yes.
I do.
He does, literally.
Take a deep breath, like put my pen down or whatever I'm doing, and put things down, and just kind of prepare myself and tell myself, in my head, don't react, don't react, don't react, and just listen. And then it goes good, right? In general.
Yeah. Because before I didn't really want to bring it up because I didn't know how you were going to respond. And I didn't know if you're going to walk out on me or blow up. Those are my childhood things that happened to me. Not that Robert would do that, but that goes through my mind.
Yeah. And it could. I could definitely, and it's happened in the past where I do get upset and I'll just get defensive and we'll get in an argument, right? And we get in an argument primarily because she doesn't mean to be critical, but yet I'm taking it critically, and it's hitting my self-worth, my dignity, so to speak, whatever. I mean, whatever you want to come up with, but at the end of the day, it's hurting my ego. And so I get defensive, and that response just triggers you, and then off we go. Right?
I feel like you're criticizing me, and then I get defensive, and then we're just a hot mess.
Yeah, and so that just that leads us into that cycle of insanity we've talked about in other episodes. It's that saying the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, but we don't get different results. We get the same results. We just get more and more upset at each other.
You're not listening to me.
Yeah, and so so when it comes to even this topic about are you working too hard, are you taking on too much, is come up with a code word that you and your spouse agree upon that you'll say, okay, we both agreed upon this is a cue that I really need to look at this thing a little bit differently, that maybe I'm taking on too much, and maybe I need to take a step back and relook at things and reassess my priorities and the things and the tasks and the volunteer opportunities I'm taking on.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that can go for either spouse.
Yeah, for sure. And this is why I'm talking about, how do we hold each other accountable? Because I think it can go both ways, right? And sometimes it goes in stages or spurts or kind of alternates. Sometimes I'm working too much, maybe sometimes you are, whatever. And we got to be able to look out for each other because, the better we are individually, the better we are collectively. And then we can move forward in life and business. And of course, there's the kids involved too, right? The kids feel it and they see it. And so if you don't listen to your spouse, you might want to listen to your kids because most likely your kids will say something that might go over your head, but they're saying something like, hey, daddy or mommy, you're working too much. I miss you, right? I've heard that a lot.
Will you go play ball with me or just hang out with me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Read me a story.
Yeah. I mean, listen to your kid. I mean, really listen, not just hear the words and then poo-poo it and discount it and stuff, but really listen to how they are just, sometimes crying for attention. And a lot of times, you just want attention on attention. It's like, well, yeah, because they're your kids and they want daddy and mommy really to pay attention to them because it fills them up. And so, you really need to be able to listen to that. And sometimes, we've heard we have guests on our podcast because we don't have kids, but we've had guests on our podcast, and sometimes their kids will say something to them that just hits them in the heart, right? It's just so, because kids are innocent and just so honest.
Yeah, aren't they?
they're just wanting you,
Hmm. That's all that
right?
matters when you're
Yeah,
little
and they just love you, and they want you. They want your attention,
until they
and
get big.
yeah, yeah. Well, and then that comes back around. We were just talking to a new friend of ours yesterday. Her kids are starting to get into the teenage years, and she's not the cool mom anymore,
Yeah.
right? And we said, yeah, well, it goes full circle. We've all been there, right? We've all been kids. You get in your teenage years, you're like, oh, mom and daddy, you don't understand what's
You
going
don't know
on. You
anything.
don't know anything. And then as you get in your 20s and then 30s, you're like, oh, crap. They knew more than I thought. Right? So, and then your kids are saying the same thing to you,
Yeah.
right? So it's a cycle, right? It's a cycle, the cycle of life. But but yeah, listen to your kids. I mean, really, they'll tell you. And so if you're not going to listen to your spouse, listen to your kids, but definitely listen to both. Listen to everybody, because they're all wanting you, and not just needing you, but they all want the best for you, right? I think kids see it too when you're overworked and you're tired, and again, maybe they say something to you, right? Like, "Mommy, you look tired." But hey, it is what it is. So what are you gonna do? Um, the other thing is, maybe we talked about accountability. Your spouse being a good accountability partner, but I think it's good to have an outside accountability partner too,
Yes.
right? A good buddy, maybe a mentor, maybe even another coach, someone you pay for. I know even in our mastermind group, a lot of times, we're talking about, how do we hold each other accountable? We're talking a lot of business stuff, but every once in a while, people will bring up some personal issues they want accountability on. And so, whatever it takes, but, because, sometimes it does get, I don't know, it sounds bad, but it gets a little wearing having your spouse as your accountability partner. And, either way, like being on the receiving end, but also on the giving end, right? I don't want to always have to hold them accountable. It'd be nice if there's somebody else out there. So having some, accountability partners that are outside the marriage, outside the home, is also very helpful. And it gets received a little bit differently when it's from your friends or a mentor or another colleague, right?
Yeah. So that means you have to reach out to these people because otherwise they won't know.
Yeah. And a lot of times we just become accountability partners, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, for sure, it's received a little bit differently, and they'll probably say the same thing your spouse has been saying, but all of a sudden,
It sounds different.
yeah, it sounds brilliant from them,
Yeah.
right?
Like, honey, I've been saying that for 6 months. You're like, oh, I got this great idea.
Yeah,
I'm like,
exactly.
okay.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, honey, so and so said this. I'm like, mm-hmm. Okay. Could have saved me a few $100. If you listen to me, I would listen to you. But yeah, so anyways, accountability buddies outside of marriage definitely helps, and it's better for the marriage too, and it takes the pressure off each other, right? And so yeah, and then the last thing is, you might still be listening. Hopefully, I'm glad you're still listening, but rationalizing it doesn't necessarily make it true. Meaning, whenever, like when you told me maybe you're taking on too much, and then, my rationalization of, oh, no, I can handle this because, it's only one, one day, one meeting out of the year, or two meetings out of the year, or four meetings out of the year is all it is for this board position. But then,
Well, and then some boards are more hours than that. So it just depends on the board, I think.
yeah, and a lot of times there's more tasks or things to do outside of the board meeting. So sometimes there's a project that you're helping out on, or even spearheading, and so there's definitely work outside of just the board meeting. And
Mm-hmm.
so, anyways, a lot of times we kind of rationalize, oh, it's just only so many meetings a year, but then you take some of the extracurricular activities that they want you to do, plus you look at the other boards that I'm on, and you add all that up, and then you really realize it's actually more of a commitment than you realize, and it's taking up more time than you realize. But it's so easy for us to kind of rationalize things and not look at the big picture of, this is just one extra duty, or one extra volunteer position, one extra board position. But when you add it on to what you've already accepted, what you already have on your plate, and you look at the breadth and scope of the time it's taking, and the toll it's taken on your life and your relationships, and then you realize, oh, maybe it is bigger than I realize.
Well, and I remember one board that wanted you too. and they said it wasn't going to be very much time, and you ended up shadowing them ahead of time, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is way more time than I thought it was going to be. So you ended up not being on that board.
Yeah.
You're like, I had no idea what was involved.
Yeah. So that leads to another good point is patience. Before you accept an opportunity, because opportunities can be just really distractions in disguise. Before you take on another opportunity is don't say yes right away. Is say, let's wait, let's pause. And maybe, through the waiting period, you might find out things that weren't initially revealed in the beginning, right? And there has been investment opportunities that we've considered, and business opportunities that we considered that in the waiting period, like things got revealed that would have been a pretty big issue had we jumped on it right away, right? And so any opportunity, like we're so conditioned, or at least me, especially, it's very flattering when you get asked to be on these positions, or whenever there's a potential business opportunity, we don't want to miss out on a good opportunity. And so we're going to say yes, we want to jump on it, but not realizing the potential ramifications it's going to have in your life and your business, what your finances or whatever. And it's not until after you say yes is when you see all the different issues that start to pop up. And so patience in these, vetting out these opportunities is so crucial that, I guess I have to hand it to you, honey, because you've always been the one to kind of put the brakes on, and I'm always one to go full speed ahead. And as I started to really implement the waiting period, it's actually beneficial. And if if it truly is an opportunity, it's still going to be there at the end of the waiting period. But you may find out, this isn't really a good opportunity for us. So there's really only upside potentially in these opportunities. But so many times, like especially when they're, I've learned this from you, honey, when they start to put the pressure on you to make a decision, that's usually a red flag.
Right. For me, it is. Because I want the freedom to be able to make a good decision. And if you're getting desperate, what's the reason? You know what I mean? Like, I can't think about it. I can't pray about it. I can't talk to my spouse about it. I can't process myself through it. Yeah.
So that's why there's so many of these, especially these hardcore salespeople, they want you to make that decision right away because they don't want you to think about it. It's kind of a point, right? They don't want you to think about it because then you'll find reasons to say no, right? And so definitely be patient with these opportunities.
Yeah, especially when it's volunteer and it's, of your time. It's like, we want to do it all, but we don't have time. And then it starts affecting our work because we don't have time to get our work done. So now we're into our family time and it's not really fair to them.
And really, it's not just volunteer stuff, but every opportunity is going to take time, right? And if time to that means time away from your family, right? So, that's another way to kind of take help from taking on too much is patience. So, all right, that's a good way to end it, honey. Patience.
Yes, patience.
So, hey, thank you for listening. And I know since you've listened this far that it's impacted you. So please share this episode with another married entrepreneur friend that needs to hear this. And we would love a great review.
Yes,
right?
we so appreciate all you guys and would love a review.
So thank you for listening. And until next week, God bless. Thank you for listening to the Thriving in Tandem podcast. Please visit our website, marriedentrepreneur.co, for a variety of free resources to help your marriage and business succeed.
And feel free to leave us a review and share this episode with another married entrepreneur. That would mean so much to us.
See you next week.